Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy ZainnCraft, and welcome back to another episode of Building Breath of the Wild in Minecraft. Last time around, we moved our way south from Hyrule Castle and built up the Great Plateau. And in today's episode, I want to move back north and work on the Woodland region, as well as Korok Forest, the Lost Woods, Thyphlo Ruins, and the Forgotten Temple. Just want to say a huge thanks to everyone who did check out part 3, and if you guys haven't, I'll leave the playlist link or a video card right here. Hopefully you guys do enjoy part 4, as I found myself having to be a lot more creative than usual this time around. But with all of that out of the way, grab yourself a snack, kick back, and let's get started on part 4 of building Breath of the Wild in Minecraft, the Woodland region. Roll that intro. The Woodland region holds a few notable locations such as Korok Forest and, by extension, the Lost Woods, Thyphlo Ruins shrouded in darkness to the north, the military training camp that sits right before the entrance to the Lost Woods, and the Forgotten Temple that sits way out west in Tanagar Canyon. These will be the 4 main locations within the Woodland region, and along those it's just some plains and some mountainscapes. So to start us off, we're going to work our way towards the military training camp, beginning at Helm Head Bridge, where the path enters Woodland from Central Hyrule. So Helm Head Bridge is just a copy and pasted bridge from Central Hyrule. And after I pasted that in, I began to work my way up the path, coloring some of these hillsides and the shoreline. There's also this gaping cavity here that's in the game, and it has some very small tectonic plates that shifted, probably due to the Great Calamity. So I custom made these, pasted them in, and put in the water and some trees. Right after this pond is what's known as Rauru Settlement Ruins, which is just more ruins that we've already built. I then built up some tree stumps there on the hill, which are there in the game, pasted in some of the destroyed houses and wagons, did some texturing to the hillside before I put in the plants and trees, and we were ready to move on. Further up this path, there is a Boko camp tucked back within a small forest, and nearly at the edge of the Woodland region, we have the Woodland Stable. The ground surrounding the stable is more cobblestone than anything, so I put in this texture. And here you guys can get a sneak peek of what Eldin may look like in the future. The Foot of Death Mountain does stretch into Woodland just a little bit, so I did have to fix up some of these spiky cliffs, and I think that they turned out really nicely. And after I did my usual decorating to this area, we were ready to move on. Now, south of Woodland Stable is what's known as Trilby Plain, so before I moved on to the training camp, I wanted to tackle this area first. There are a few small overhanging cliffs that you'll pass by riding through here, along with a small camp and tent that's very close to the shoreline of the river. And after putting in the trees and plants, the southeast corner of Woodland would be finished. Now, last but not least, before hitting up the training camp, I finished some more of Death Mountain's cliff faces right above the stable. I also changed the biome up here where the grass is to like a savanna biome, because the grass there is kind of like more yellowish than anything. If you have the game, you'll know what I'm talking about. And this wooded area that starts at Woodland Stable and goes all the way up to the front door of the Lost Woods is what's known as Minshi Woods. Nothing too serious about it. It's just a very densely packed forest, along with some of Death Mountain's rocks scattered within it. But with this finished, we're ready to hit up the military training camp. The military training camp is home to a bunch of different Breath of the Wild mobs, namely the Moblins, Bokoblins, and a Wizrobe or 2, I believe. But it also houses the Woodland Sheikah Tower with a semi-destroyed Boko skull on top of it. There are also a bunch of destroyed scaffoldings, so let's go ahead and get started on the military training camp. So this is the first time that I noticed that the different Sheikah Towers' heights all vary. So you saw me just take about 1/4 of the tower and then pasted the full tower on top of it, if that made any sense. I then destroyed a Boko skull and put it at the top and bottom of the tower like it is in game. And then I outlined the scaffoldings in this pond with red wool before actually decorating them and dressing them up. This part of the training camp was a bit tedious because each of these scaffoldings were different heights, sizes, sizes and rotations, so I had to do all of them individually. A lot of them are also connected up with these bridges as well, so I just marked out the angle with yellow wool, and then I built off of that. And once I was done with this first pond, I began to mark out the rest of the broken scaffoldings and platforms with yellow concrete. I also marked out some of those broken tree stumps again with like light blue concrete, I believe. And after I put in the final minor details of this first pond area, we were ready to move on to the rest of the camp. Now further down the hill, we have a brand new enemy camp module that I had to build up. But first I pasted in some more of these platforms and scaffoldings that are broken. There's also a half submerged bucco skull within the pond down there below. And then I got to work on that previously mentioned module. Now this one has a skull at the top of it, but it's very small, so I had to make the head a little bit large just so that I could capture the detail that I wanted. But once I got that down, I just pasted it into a spot. And then the rest of the military camp was just a breeze. It was just putting in more scaffoldings, platforms, tree stumps, and a few small minor details. Now working my way west from the camp all the way to Tanagar Canyon, it was really just a lot of different trees and tectonic plate shifts that I had to build up. This hillside to the north of Hyrule Castle is what's known as Rauru Hillside, so you guys could just see a glimpse of me dressing up this entire area. Now this entire plain that sits right to the west of the Lost Woods and right above the Forgotten Temple is what's known as Irch Plain. And here you can see me put in the Serene Stable as well as some ruins that sit right to the south of it. It starts with an M, but I forgot the name. But I'm just doing the usual here, putting in the trees and small details and rocks. So I'll quickly run through this entire plain so that we can get on to the Forgotten Temple. Now next up on the to-do list was a portion of Tanagar Canyon as well as the Forgotten Temple that sits within it. The Forgotten Temple has two very large rooms in it, both littered with guardians, and the back room with a goddess statue and a shrine. So to start us off with this massive portion of Woodland, let's begin by dressing up Tanagar Canyon. So as you guys can see here, I went with a very packed block palette, mixing in a bunch of different shades of browns and yellows with a hint of some gray. And once the palette was decided on, I colored the entire canyon with blue concrete, and then I went back over the ground with pink concrete as I wanted it to be more darker and more brown than the walls. It's not actually like this in Breath of the Wild, but this way to just make it more interesting for when you guys finally get to check it out. Now with the combination of Axiom and World Edit, I went through this entire gorge and just made it look real nice, building a bunch of different rocks and overhanging ledges and cliff faces before painting it with the block palette that we decided on earlier. Now with the gorge ready to be built in, I started with all of the different modules for the Forgotten Temple, beginning with the pillars that sit outside as well as inside the temple. These pillars kind of slope outward as you go up them, So it was kind of interesting to build this. It was really fun. And once I finished this module, I had to copy and paste it and rotate it at 45 degrees, as of course the Forgotten Temple has to be at a 45-degree angle. Great. No, but all jokes aside, the Forgotten Temple wasn't actually too bad. Now here you can see me working on the ceiling of the temple, and this is going to be the roof for the outside as well as the inside. I put in the octagonal shape in the center of this module as well as the rest of the details, and then we were ready to move on. Now here I'm starting with the actual entrance of the Forgotten Temple, and as you guys could tell with the last module, I just decided to just build everything on a 45-degree angle. I pasted in some of these pillars that we already built previously, and then I outlined the archway with yellow wool, fixed up the rest of the walls and stuff like that before putting in the bird statues that sit on either side of the entrance. Lastly, I began to work on the interior modules like these small pillars in the second room, the walls of the Forgotten Temple, and once I finished these, all of the modules for the Forgotten Temple would be completed. Now lastly, I did a poll asking you guys if you wanted me to build guardians for the Forgotten Temple and by extension the rest of the map, and overwhelmingly it wasn't even a question. You guys did want these, so they'll be implemented throughout the rest of the map as well. From the Guardian Stalkers to the Decayed Guardians, as well as the Sentry Turret Guardians and even the Skywatchers, every single module of the Guardians was built up and will from now on be implemented throughout the rest of the project. So I started by pasting in the entrance that we built, as well as the 4 pillars that sit outside of the temple. A few of these pillars were leaning at some weird angles as well, so I just did this with Axiom and I think it looks real nice. Now coming on up top, this section of the roof was actually specially made within the game, so I just pasted in half of the entrance as well as a rock or two, and then I put in the ceiling module that we already built before moving on to the interior. Now I cut out a diagonal rectangle for the room where the temple would be so I'll have some space. And then I just started by pasting in all of the different modules we already built. There are also some holes in the ground that stretch all the way across each side of the room. But once I had the basic foundation built, I was ready to jump in and completely tackle this first room. So I started with this hole in the wall on the outside of the temple, and once I moved on in, I put in all of the different ledges, all of the fallen over pillars. I built up the back wall there that leads into the second room with the goddess statue. I also put the tree that comes out of the right side wall. Finished off by putting in all of the different guardians, and once I did that, I was ready to move on to room 2. Now room 2 was kind of more of the same, putting in the same walls and making sure they were spaced out properly. The entrance of the temple goes all the way in the back of this room as well. The only minor difference in this room being the goddess statue, which I would build separately. I built a slightly larger statue from the one that we built in the last part, pasted it in at a 45-degree angle, and then with that, I believe the base of the temple will be completed. Now after that was completed, I put in the statue as well as the shrine that sits right before it. I also put the rock on the left side of this room up against the wall, finished up the rest of room 2, put in a bunch of leaves and holes in the wall, and with that, the Forgotten Temple will be completed. Next up was the Deplian Badlands and the Dreenan Highlands. Right to the north of the Forgotten Temple and on the way to Thyphlo Ruins, this area is basically covered in all of Elden's rocks. So I'm gonna do some basic terraforming here, and then I'm gonna cover this entire region with white concrete. There are also different patches of mud and grass. So I'll mark out where the grass will go with yellow concrete and where the mud will go with red concrete. I also use the rock tool here again, just to make these cliffs look a lot more interesting. And once I finish terraforming the entire region, I'll go through and put in the minor details like a brand new enemy camp and some ruins up against the foot of Death Mountain, and then we can get started on Thyphlo Ruins. Just like over by the Woodland stable, you guys can see me putting more Death Mountain spikes, so think of it as a sneak peek for when we finally do tackle Elden. Next up is Thyphlo Ruins, the mysterious and abandoned Zonai civilization to the north of Hyrule. Shrouded in darkness, this lone island sits in the middle of a bog to the west of Death Mountain, and it has a lone shrine in the center of it along with the Hinox. So let's build all of the different modules for Thyphlo. Now luckily, all of these ruins are actually found within the Faron region as well as some places within Ridgeland. So I started with the bigger of the two pillars that are in the Zonai ruins, and there are a few different variations of this pillar, like one is destroyed, one is this version I'm building here, and one has like a statue on the top of it or something. And you guys can see for the block palette that I went with deep slate, as I wanted to differentiate it from just the regular stone, brick, and stone, as well as it actually being darker within the game. But anyway, you guys can see me starting on the third module here, with this one as well having a variation or two with it, some being shorter, one is broken in half. Next up is actual wall of the Zonai people that'll go in Faron, Ridgeland, and of course Thyphlo Ruins. I made the small pillars in it using deep slate wall, and once I had this module completed, I continued on with some other modules that aren't found as many times throughout the Zonai Ruins, but they are still there in the game. I then built up one of the many torches that are all throughout the Zonai Ruins, as well as the little neck thingy that the dragon head sits atop. I made one of these that are horizontal, as well as one of these that are vertical. Now the Zonai Ruins have three different animals that represent it, those being the dragon, the hog, and the owl. So I started with the dragon head first, and I put in the little swirls on each side of it before making the top of it mossy, like in the game. And then I moved on to the owl statue, outlining the entire shape with orange wool, you guys know the drill. And then I just textured it at the end using a variation of darker stone, some moss block, and green terracotta. Last but not least was the hog head, and I felt like I was a professional sculptor. I just took a block of yellow wool and carved out the head, and with this, all of the Zonai Ruin modules will be completed. So to begin Thyphlo, I just got rid of all of the weirdly generated rocks on the island. I then put in the lake bed and did some basic terrain texturing, making the grass more muddy, mossy, and sandy. Now I started by placing the shrine in the center of Thyphlo, and then I surrounded it with the wall modules that we created previously. And then between Tears of the Kingdom and some other maps to look at, I just placed all of the different modules we created in their respective locations. And I think that up to this point in part 4, Thyphlo is probably my favorite part of Woodland because it just seems different than the usual stone brick ruins that you might build. It was really cool to watch this island turn into an Aztec-like or Mayan-like civilization that was long forgotten. Now, once all of the modules were put in place, I built the 2 bridges connecting Thyphlo to the mainland, put in the water, and with that, Thyphlo Ruins will be completed. I also built up the very first Hinox in the map. Thyphlo Ruins has a lone blue Hinox within the center of it. And as I did with the Guardians, I will go back and paste all of the Hinoxes in each location that we've already built previously. Now to go ahead and get on to the final portion of Woodland, I put the lone statues outside of Thyphlo that go down the hill, as well as finished up Mount Drina. And then I built up Makar Island right to the west of the Lost Woods. And with this, we were finally ready to start the last leg of Woodland, the Lost Woods and Korok Forest. The Great Hyrule Forest is home to the Deku Tree and Korok Forest, as well as the Lost Woods that surround it. So before jumping to the actual forest, I'm going to do some basic terrain work, notably with the actual island's cliff, as these cliffs look very jagged and spooky in the game, so I wanted to capture this feel first. So I began by lining the edge of the cliff with white concrete. This way I could separate the grass from the stony cliffs, as I would be painting the cliffs with white concrete as well. I then changed the bed of this lake to blue concrete, this lake being Lake Makar, before changing it all to stone and putting in the water. And one final thing I did is I changed the biome of the Great Hyrule Forest to the forest biome, except where Korok Forest is. I changed that entire area to a cherry grove. As you guys know that the biomes within the Great Hyrule Forest are different. It's like when you're in the Lost Woods, it's a lot more cool colored, but when you're in Korok Forest, it's a lot more vibrant. So that's how I wanted to capture that effect. And lastly, you can see me putting all of these weird jagged spikes along the edge of the forest as they are in the game. And one final thing to mention, the block palette I used for the cliffs of the Great Hyrule Forest is the same block palette I used over at the Coliseum. It's pretty much a mixture of dead coral blocks and some stone. Now, next thing I had to do was I had to build some tree modules for the Lost Woods. I'll show you 3 of these ogre trees as I didn't want it to get too repetitive, but you guys could see the rest here. There are also some tree stumps, some larger boulders, and some more hollowed logs that we will use to populate the forest. So I'm gonna go in a circle around Korok Forest and tackle it last. So starting with the entrance, I put in this archway, as well as the torches that are supposed to guide you to the halfway mark of the first leg of the Lost Woods. And I put in the first ogre tree where the torches end, and you have to follow the flame particles of your own torch to get the Korok Forest. Then lastly, I just populated this first quarter of the Great Hyrule Forest with all of the modules we built previously, and then we would be ready to move on. Now next I tackled Mito Swamp and the Trial of Wood to the northeast of Korok Forest. I put in the hollowed logs leading out of Korok Forest and just followed the path to where the shrine is in the swamp. And as I did previously, I just populated the entire area and we were ready to move on to the next Korok Trial. Now the second Korok Trial, the Lost Pilgrimage, is to the northwest of Korok Forest where you follow the Korok. And here again, I just put in the shrine before populating the area and moving on to the last Korok Trial. Now last but not least, we have Lake Saria and the Trial of Second Sight. There are about 4 or 5 hollowed logs leading out of Korok Forest to the southwest. However, I went about building this part of the Lost Woods a little bit differently than the others. In the game, you have to follow a bunch of trees that have metallic boulders inside them, so I pasted these in first. I even put the shield inside of this chest on top of this boulder that you have to put inside of the tree's mouth next to the lake there. Built up the dock in Lake Saria and put the tree in the center of it, and then I completely populated the last remaining bit of the Great Hyrule Forest. Now this area of the Woodland region completely blew out Thyphlo Ruins. Here we are in Korok Forest, beginning with the Deku Tree. I marked out the pedestal where the Master Sword sits with red wool down there. And I started on the Deku Tree with a cylindrical orange wool tower about 155 blocks tall. And this took a lot of Revali scaling around Korok Forest just to get the shape of the tree right. But I cut out the hole, as you guys just saw me do a few seconds ago, at the bottom of the tree, put in the shrine and all of the roots with white concrete. We put some small puddles here in the forest as well, and then I got to work on the face. I think the face turned out cool for what it's worth, as you guys could see me sketching around with it for a little bit. Then I moved on to the nose and the eyebrows at the top of the face. And lastly, I moved on to the large branches that shroud Korok Forest. I did about 3 different sizes for the Deku Tree's branches, these ones being the large ones, and then some medium ones coming off of those and some smaller ones coming off of those. And for the shape of the small branches, I just used the select convex brush within World Edit to give me some different angles. Lastly, I masked the brush to orange wool and white wool using a combination of darker wood and some moss blocks. And with that, the Deku Tree's base will be completed. Now jumping up to the top of the Deku Tree, I made the little turquoise leaf looking thing where the sleeping Korok sits using some of the warped planks, and then I placed around a bunch of lily pads, flowering azalea leaves, and some drip leaves to make this area completed. Now moving on to the interior of the Deku Tree, I just used the melt command and axiom to hollow out the area that I needed. Now off to the left, I started with the inn? I mean, is it even an inn? It's like one bed. Then in the middle, I did the food and ingredients shop. And then off to the right, I did the supply shop. And then I put some of those vines to finish off this area that grow upward. I mean, I forgot the name of them. I didn't even know they existed until I built the inside of the Deku Tree. And put in the small goddess statue over there to finish off the interior. Now, last but not least is Korok Forest itself. I was playing around with some command blocks for the sword and stone in the pedestal. And I got it to work. I just couldn't rotate the sword. It was facing east to west, so I just scrapped the entire idea, put in a bunch of oak trees around this area as well as vegetation, some small boulders. Korok Forest also has these very unique light sources coming off of vines, so I just used some of the frog light variants, and I dotted these all around the area to put that final touch on Korok Forest. Last but not least, I worked on the canopy of the Deku Tree using spheres of blue concrete with a percentage of air in the brush to make it a little bit more airy. And I used a combination of different pink blocks for the leaves, and with these leaves finished, part 4 of the Woodland region would be too. Thank you guys if you stuck all the way to the end of yet another part of building Breath of the Wild in Minecraft. If you guys did enjoy, please give me a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe. It really does mean a lot to me. And yeah, knocked out another region of the map. I'll go ahead and show you guys the main locations of this region. Here you guys got Tanagar Canyon, and as you can see, I'm sprint flying through here, and you could just tell how large the map really is. And this is only a fraction of the canyon. This is only the part of the canyon that's in the Woodland region, so just want to keep letting you guys know the map is large. So coming on inside the Forgotten Temple, you guys can see I put all of the guardians in their respective locations. And on into the second room, we do have the goddess statue all the way in the back, the trees coming out of the wall, and all of the guardians in this room as well. Here we have Dinraal, and I created Dinraal at the very last minute after completing the Lost Woods. Unfortunately, the replay file for me creating Dinraal got corrupted and I wasn't able to put it in this video, so I apologize for that. But I'll make sure for the other two Great Spirit Dragons that I do have those files and you guys can see the process. I actually think I made Dinraal too big, but I like the way it looks, so I'm just gonna leave it. But if I change my mind in the future, I'll just scrap it and downsize him a little bit. I also decided to tuck him all the way back here in the northern part of the map in the Woodland region, just to give you guys one more interesting thing to look at when you explore the far reaches of the map. Now here we are at the entrance of Thyphlo, and like I said, I did have a blast building this. I just think that it got seconded by the Lost Woods and Korok Forest. I said this over on my community tab, but if I do find a way to make the fog that surrounds Thyphlo look interesting and good, then I'll be sure to put it in. But as of right now, if the map comes out as it is now, you'll just be able to explore it without the darkness. I'm still contemplating putting down a command block at the entrance that when you step over it, it creates a darkness effect in Minecraft, but we'll see, we'll see. Then last but not least, we have the Great Hyrule Forest and Korok Forest that sits in the center of it. I think this area turned out super cool and looks really, really spooky if you come down here with these large looming trees. And as you guys saw us build, we did put in all 3 Korok trials for you to do when the map download comes out. And be sure to navigate the woods exactly how you would in game, because even though we're in Minecraft, you still may get lost in this densely populated forest. Then for the final part of the Great Hyrule Forest, we have Korok Forest. Here we got the Deku Tree, and you can see how massive it looks with the pretty leaves hanging down. I think at some point I will go add cherry blossom leaves to the actual Deku Tree. I couldn't do it with World Edit because, as you guys know, the leaves will just despawn if you do it that way, so they have to be done by hand. So we'll get around to it eventually. I just want to move on to other things with the map first. So anyways, as I said, I hope you guys did enjoy. In the next part, we'll double back south again. I'm sorry we're jumping all over the map, but this is the final time we'll make a big jump. We're gonna go back south to either the lake region and Lake Hylia with Farosh coming out of the lake, or we'll do the Dueling Peaks region along with Kakariko. And I'm gonna let you guys vote on that. So starting now, you guys will be able to vote which region we go to next. But both of those regions will be the next 2 parts of the project, because this will be the start of us making our giant counterclockwise loop around the map. So if you guys vote to do Dueling Peaks next, we'll do the lake region after that. Then we'll do Hateno and Farron, and I'll let you guys vote on that. And then we'll do Lanayru, then we'll do Akala, so on and so forth, so you guys get a general picture of how we're gonna do the rest of the project. However, before we jump to part 5, I will be taking a small break from the Breath of the Wild project, because I have 2 or 3 videos that I want to drop for you guys. One of those videos being a downloadable map for you guys, no spoilers. I also have another tutorial that I'm going to drop on the channel. I've been getting asked to build a certain structure that I'm going to build up for those guys. And I have another project that we already started on the channel. I want to jump back to that and give you the second part of it, just so you guys can have a little bit of diversity and just so I can have a change of scenery. So expect those 3 videos to be the next ones on the channel. And once I clear those, we'll jump right back into part 5. This should give you guys time to vote on where we'll go next. So I think everything will work out good. And just to give you guys a hint, that downloadable map is going to be the next video that I drop after this one, because I just think it's going to be very, very, very crazy. But like I said, no spoilers. I haven't seen anybody build it yet, so I think it's going to be insane. I hope you guys enjoy that when that comes out. But let's go ahead and wrap up this video. I've been talking a lot. I've been ZainnCraft. I hope you guys enjoyed part 4, and I'll catch you guys in the next vid. Peace out.